Here it's been pushed in too much, so I'll use the clay strips brush to fill that area. For this piece, I'll copy the modifiers. The strength of the displacement is too high, so we'll need to reduce that. I'm going to repeat the same steps, adding it to a collection, then making a duplicate with shrink wrap modifier and erasing some of it. I'll use a new empty for this. And then I'll start playing with the empty to find some interesting parts of the texture. Like before, I'll set some keyframes for interesting displacement, so I can choose the best one later. Ooh, this one looks cool. We're definitely setting a keyframe for that. So now I've set some keyframes for the empty, each with different displacement looks. This one is my favorite. It probably doesn't make much sense to put all these fragile cables on the outside, but it looks cool. Apply visual geometry to mesh to apply all the modifiers for this piece. We'll do the trick with the duplicate and the shrink wrap modifier. And create a vertex group and add it to the shrink wrap modifier. You may have to click on the button to invert the vertex group. Now we can switch to weight painting to erase the displacement we don't like. And as before, it's easier to do this with overlays disabled. And reducing the subdivision levels also helps to make things run more smoothly. I'm just erasing some parts that I don't want. I'll erase this pipe as well, not because I don't like the way it looks, but because I want to replace it with a pipe that I've modeled, which gives us more control over its look. As a reminder of where the pipe should go, I'll draw some temporary annotations by holding D. Annotations can be really useful for stuff like this. Where the pipe goes into the model, I'll add a protrusion using an alpha map. To make a brush with an alpha texture, select the Draw brush. Make a copy by clicking on the number next to the name, and give it a clear name. Then in the texture settings, load an alpha texture. I've prepared many alpha textures that you can use, along with thumbnails, so it's easier to see what they do. It helps to sort them by name, so the thumbnails are next to the alpha maps that they belong to. I'll use this one. Then set mapping to area plane. And stroke method to drag dot. And fall off to constant, so we see the entire alpha texture. It seems we'll need to crank up the subdivisions. And actually that reveals that there are some leftover bits of the original pipe. We still have the shrink wrap modifier, so we can quickly erase those in weight paint mode. It was convenient that we still had that shrink wrap modifier, but actually we should apply all modifiers now so that we can sculpt. Now we can place our alpha. Press Ctrl F if you want to rotate the alpha texture. And F to change its radius. The strength of the alpha brush should normally be set to 1. I just noticed that X symmetry wasn't enabled. And enabling it didn't help for some reason. It seems that the origin is in a weird place. That's why symmetry is not working well. First I have to press Shift S and set origin to world origin. Then set the origin of the object to the 3D cursor location. Interestingly, our symmetry still doesn't work. A good place to look when there's trouble is the transform values. In this case, the rotation is off. So in this case, I just apply the rotation. Okay, now finally the symmetry is working. Let's select the chest piece and also add an alpha here. It doesn't look very good because it's placed on top of existing detail. If we just quickly erase some of the detail by smoothing it, that will make it work better. That looks much better. I'll shift click here to place the 3D cursor here. And then I'll add a single vertex. Extra objects needs to be enabled in preferences for this to work. Now in edit mode, we can extrude this vertex. Enable snapping to the surface so that each extruded vertex snaps to the surface. Now we can extrude in the direction the pipe should go in. In the option panel, we can hide or remove the annotation as we don't need it anymore. Convert this extruded vertex to a curve. You can increase the depth to see it better. And enable Shade Smooth. I'll extrude this vertex at the end so that it goes into the geometry of this shoulder object. We'll need to turn off snapping in order to be able to continue. Do the same at the other end, and move the vertices a bit so that the flow of the pipe is better. This isn't going to be the final pipe, but the curve is going to guide the pipe model into shape. But the curve having some depth helps to adjust the vertices to get it in the optimal shape. I'll append one of the cable models that I've prepared. These files are all included in the download of this course, in case you want to use the same pipe. The pipe already has an array modifier and a curve modifier, which you can use to let it follow the curve's shape. Just pick that curve in the curve object field. If it moves to some strange location, that's because of the fact that the curve and the pipe object are in different places. So let's undo that for a moment. Select the curve, press Shift S and move the 3D cursor to select it. Then select the pipe object, press Shift S and move the selection to the 3D cursor. Now try picking the curve object again in the curve modifier. The pipe needs to be scaled down. As you can see, it's quite jagged, because the curve doesn't have a lot of subdivisions. Select all of the curve in edit mode, right-click and subdivide. Repeat that with Shift R. Then right-click and choose Smooth to make the curve more smooth. Repeat a few times with Shift R. Now it looks nice and smooth. By pressing G to move and X to constrain that to the X-axis, we can move the pipe along the curve. It looks like we have to scale it a bit as well. By increasing the count value on the array modifier, we can extend the length of the pipe. And then fine-tune it with some scaling. By rotating it along the X-axis with R and X, we can reveal the more interesting looking part of the pipe. I'll just quickly add this pipe to a new collection to stay organized. We can place the curve in that collection as well. With proportional editing enabled, we can still adjust the curve a bit in edit mode, if needed.